Hey, good morning, good evening. We got people coming in from all around the world. It's great to see so many folks and faces. Please join me in welcoming the Oscar co-creators. We've got Peter, Glenn, Elena, Beatrice, and Jason Grillo, also co-founder of AirMiners. And everybody's coming here to talk about Oscar. And Oscar is this is like how we change the game in terms of how you simplify the contracting side of things, how you simplify if you're a supplier. Go out and have conversations with potential customers about this, right? How valuable is this for you? Which pieces are most valuable for you? If you're on the corporate side, you can use this to go have a conversation with the legal department. Say, hey, here's what we got. What do you think about this? What would you want to see here? What are the pieces that really work for us so we can move these contracts forward? Maybe we can, if you're on the funding side, you can use this contract to buy some carbon dioxide removal credits. And maybe you're sitting here, you've looked up on Oscar, maybe you have some questions and some comments at 9:40, so in about 40 minutes. That's your chance to ask questions with the creators of Oscar. And if you're also sitting there being like, I'm not sure about this, one of the things I want you to listen for is this is a project created by some of the most passionate people in carbon dioxide removal, in the journey to stabilize the climate. And so listen for maybe there's a project that you want to start or something that you want to build and create with a group of people like this. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Grillo. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Tito. Good to see you. Good to see you all here. And thank you so much for uh, letting us have an event in AirMiners about Oscar. So, as Tito so eloquently put it, yeah, Oscar it's an all volunteer effort. We're not an entity. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit. We're a group of people who've come together to address a critical need in carbon removal, which is that there's really no standardized way of doing contracting, which we've observed is a major hurdle from listening to suppliers such as intermediaries and buyers of carbon removal credits. So that's how Oscar came to be, and we've been working at this for well over a year now to hash out the document. We launched it at COP30 at a virtual session at the CDR as part of the CDR30 platform, and have had it in the wild ever since then. What we're going to do now is talk through a little bit about what Oscar is with Peter Meyer, who many of you probably know already, who's at Stairsdale McFinley and Meyer, partner in New York City at a law firm. And he has very generously donated his time to create the Oscar document for anybody and everybody to use. I'll also introduce Laura Katayama. Hi, Laura, who's a longtime air miner on the Oscar team, and is also volunteering with us to help implement Oscar. So to understand how it is being used, how it's being applied, and to field any questions, comments, and concerns that people have about the document. So with that, again, the way we're gonna work is have Peter and Laura and I talk about Oscar for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then we're gonna go into breakout rooms, always an air miner specialty, so that you can talk amongst yourselves about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you think about Oscar. Then we're gonna come back into this main Zoom for Q&A and debriefing and unpacking what some of those learnings are. So I don't want to keep anyone from I don't want to hold anyone back here. So without further ado, Peter, why don't you just do Laura and Peter maybe do a quick introduction to yourselves, and then Peter, you can start in on the on kind of the nuts and bolts what Oscar is.
Right. Yeah, so Peter Meyer, I'm an attorney in New York, working on CDR transactions. I've been doing this now for a little bit over 3 years. I've always worked sort of in the energy space, lots of renewable wind and solar transactions. And then I got into CDR, a little bit over 3 years ago, and went down this rabbit hole and found this place. The space super amazing, and got mesmerized by it pretty much from the beginning. And one of the challenges in this space is that there are lots of contracts, floating around that very often look very different from one another, which makes it difficult to transact. So we identified this issue. It basically came out of a closed-door buyers event that Glenn Morley held at one of the Carbon Unbound summits. And one of the issues that people identified was lack of standardization in contracts. So we took that idea away with us, bounced it around for a few months, started developing a template based on our own experiences in transacting in the CDR space, looking at contracts that others are using, Microsoft, Frontier, and then trying to build something where we thought, well, this works pretty well as a baseline. Primarily at the beginning, we thought for buyers, right? Because if we want this space to grow, we want to get more buyers involved. So we had to look at it a little bit from a buyer's perspective, but unlike Frontier or Microsoft, we wanted to have a balanced approach because suppliers are young companies, startup companies. It makes no sense sort of to overburden them with liabilities and obligations they won't be able to meet. The first draft that we had developed about 6 months before it was launched at COP was way more detailed and extensive than what we eventually ended up publishing. The feedback that we got was, and we spoke to lots of people, right? We shared it with lawyers, we shared it with buyers, intermediaries, suppliers, insurance people, financial people. So we really, it's not just that we sort of built this in our own dark chamber, and we really sort of went out into the world and gathered information. And the first information that we got was, oh, this is great what you built here, but this is sort of way too detailed, way too complex, especially if you want sort of first-time buyers to get into this space. You need to trim it down to make it easier to digest for people. So we took that lesson and built a sort of baseline agreement that contains sort of the main elements of a CDR transaction. But from experience, I can tell you that it is with relative ease, it is possible sort of to build it out in either direction you want it to have, right? So for a buyer, if they want to have, I don't know, project milestones, for instance, which are not in this agreement, it's easy to add that. Other things, most favored nation clause isn't there, right? So if a buyer wants that, again, it's relatively easy to add it. There is also a guidebook that comes with it that explains sort of the provisions that are in the agreement, and also contains a few comments as to what is not in the agreement, but what the parties might want to consider maybe. And then sort of additional considerations, right? Like a most favored nation clause, for instance, a buyer might want to have that, but it adds a level of complexity when it comes to bankability, right? So this is a clause a lender might potentially struggle with. So there's a bit of a trade-off sometimes. One thing that I think is important for everyone on this call to know is that this is not just a theoretical exercise. OSCAR is being used in the field already. There are sort of significant CDR transactions being done based on OSCAR. We're rolling it out across various jurisdictions. So we started with New York, then we had a German law version. When you hear my accent, you know whose fault that is. We now have an English law version that was just prepared last week. Swiss and Canadian law is in the works, so will be ready by the end of April. Then we are working on an Indian law version, and hopefully Singapore and Japan towards the end of this year.
And if I may, Peter, I just shared a link of where we're hosting the document with our partners at CDR.FYI. Again, just to underscore, this is a open document. It's not it's not the final word. It's for you all to look at, download, consult an attorney, before putting it to use yourself. But the base version of this is available for anyone to use free of charge.
Right.
So there's that. Thanks, Peter. Laura, maybe do a quick intro and talk about your role and how people can work with you on Oscar.
Sure. I'm Laura Katayama. I've met many of you over the years in AirMiners. My pre-CDR career was high volume document production. And I joined this presentation at COP30, and I was so impressed with the work that the team here has done. The quality of the document and the thought and effort that's gone into it. So I was very excited to reach out and try to join this team because this is an area where I feel like I could have the greatest impact in carbon removal. And I believe that it has the potential to raise the floor of the entire industry by building the infrastructure that we so badly need. It also helps suppliers to try to mitigate the time and money spent on these contracts, on the bespoke contracts. To have a standard form that you can start with will save you time and money. And also to understand the operational aspects of the contract, because the contracts that you sign will dictate the operation of your company. So to try and understand how all of those elements work together, I'm just very excited to be part of the team. And I'm available to answer questions. I'll probably address that at the end, if that's okay with you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks. And Laura, it's a privilege to have you on the team as well. So thank you for all your efforts. Also, just to note from my own personal experience, in AirMiners Launchpad, Tito, you can maybe back this up, but we were asked very frequently, does anyone have any standard carbon removal contract that they can use, that they can share openly? And that just kind of resonated into us, a realization of a need, and that's where Oscar fits in. So yes, it's for startups. Yes, it's for buyers. Yes, it's for intermediaries and insurance companies and financiers to observe and look at. And it's something that we feel is, as Laura mentioned, it's a piece of infrastructure that's lacking, has been lacking in the so far to date. So, Peter, Laura, if any other comments you want to talk to, and then after that we can go to breakout rooms to get so we can get your participation, hear what you have to, and then come back here to get your reactions to what you heard.
Right. I mean, one thing maybe that is really, if we want the CDR industry to grow, we need to get banks involved. We need to get financial institutions involved. We need to get insurance companies involved. These are sort of important underpinnings for any mature market. And for banks and insurance companies, it is difficult to navigate a new industry or a new space without sort of an established understanding as to what a contract should contain, right? What's important in a CDR transaction. And so what we're trying to do is simply by adoption, that as many people around the globe and as many law firms around the globe, and we're building a network of law firms in various jurisdictions that are important for CDR to get this out into the market and to use it and establish a standard that way. But this is also, having said all this, this is also, we're looking at this as a living document, right? It's not like, unlike Frontier, who sort of dropped it on the market and said, this is what we are using. If it works for us, it's probably also good for you. We want to learn your experience, learn about your experiences in using this, right? Give us feedback to say, this worked great. This clause was a bit tricky to negotiate. Most people don't like this. And hey, by the way, I think you're missing clauses X, Y, and Z, right? So we want this to be a living document that is enhanced and developed over time. One parallel that I very often mention is I do a lot of work in the venture capital space, and the National Venture Capital Association in the US, they've published templates for 2 decades now for early stage venture capital transactions, and they're updating this constantly. Every few months, they make changes to the templates that they have published previously, because they say, the market has evolved, or we see that in a certain kind of transactions, we see this clause. They even break it down, right? If you have this kind of setup, use this clause. In another kind of setup, use this one. And that's also, so the next stage for us would be to build these kind of, modules that people can use.
Yes, exactly. And that's why feedback that you provide to the team, and Laura is leading the effort on that through her own efforts in partnership with CDR.FYI. That's where we could really use a hand from you all in order to learn as Peter mentioned, what's working, what's not working, and what would the future of Oscar look like. In the long term, we see this almost like a wiki style document where people can add to it, and then we'll and make suggestions, and then we'll go from Oscar version 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.2, et cetera, et cetera.
Jason, do you want me to talk about the survey that we're going to launch, or do you want to talk about that later?
Sure,
Okay.
That'd be great.
Well, okay, so as a follow-on to what Peter and Jason were saying, we've developed a survey with CDR.FYI. It will be launched April 2nd, and that's where we can use as much information from all of you as possible to help guide us to develop the form and make it as usable as possible for everyone. So please look out for that and answer if you can.
Thanks, Laura.
Sure.
Excellent. So if no other comments, we're about 20 minutes in, so I think this is a good time to go into breakout teams. Tito, looks like you've been setting that up in the background, so thanks. And we'll come back here at maybe 40 minutes after the hour so that we can launch into some Q&A.
All right, folks, opening the rooms now. I request you.
How'd that go, everyone?
Went great.
Good. Cool. So, hope you had a good conversation with other folks, and hopefully you made some other initially made connections that will bear out how you can improve your own efforts in carbon removal. What we want to do now is unpack from you all what you heard, what you saw, what you thought of from your discussion about Oscar. I can say we had a couple of people hang back in this general room during the breakouts, so we have some we have some initial thoughts coming out of that, which we can share, and likewise hope to hear from from the breakout people as well. Alexandra in particular had a thought or two about aspects of Oscar that were useful to her and what she does. So, Alexandra, could you maybe unmute and share?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. So I sit on the internal sustainability team of BCG. So we're a buyer of carbon removals, and the contract served really well as a basis for our template. And in particular, I think it was very useful to see the shortfall mechanisms that were being suggested, specifically the distinction between the delivery and generation, which relate to the different responsibilities of the different entities that can be involved in the chain. So yeah, that actually helped us um, frame our templates depending on whether we were working directly with a project developer or with an intermediary.
Yeah.
But I think overall, yeah, it's been great work. So thank you.
Thanks, Alexandra. One thing to note about the clauses of the contract is, Peter can certainly speak more to this, but that there's two different kinds of shortfall that we want to account for. First is the generation shortfall. If something happens where the product developer isn't able to make the credit themselves. The other one is a delivery shortfall. If there's something that happens um, logistically or with the registry, that the credit can't be delivered or registered. Those are two different kinds of shortfall, two different kinds of risk that we wanted to account for in the contract.
Right. I think sort of one of the takeaways from our breakout session was that I think people identified standardized contracts as extremely helpful for two reasons. One is sort of to um, uh, make the negotiation process smoother, right? So we have one supplier in our room who has experience in dealing with multiple buyers, but then, every time they get sort of a different kind of contract they need to work through. So having a standardized contract would be tremendously helpful. And this can also be a very helpful tool for suppliers, right? If you're dealing with Microsoft or Frontier, there's no chance that you introduce this agreement, right? That needs to be clear. They're going to send you their version, and you got to deal with this. But there are other buyers, right? First-time buyers who or less experienced buyers who want to enter into medium-sized corporates and say we're going to get into this space. They don't have the experience. Their in-house team hasn't done this. So if you're going to be able as a supplier to send them an agreement and saying, hey, this is something we are using for our transactions, it gives you then you have a good baseline to start from, and it also looks good on you as a supplier, right? You can send them a sort of a professional agreement, and it also adds to the cachet that you can as you can portray yourself, right? As someone who knows about this stuff. That can also be very helpful. And the second point is just in terms of getting financing. Because banks, when they can look at standardized agreements and they just check the box and say, okay, seen this, this is in here, this is in here. That makes, from a due diligence standpoint, makes things just so much easier. We also, in that context, we are also working on a checklist, basically on 3 checklists, one for buyers, one for suppliers, and one for intermediaries.
Yes.
Where we identify sort of certain risks associated with your role in this process. And sort of giving suggestions as to how they can be mitigated, in the contract, or outside the contract, right? There may be insurance solutions out there also you buyer might want to look at. So we're working on, we're pretty much advanced on the checklist for buyers. and for intermediaries and suppliers, they will also be available very soon. There'll be the cross references either to the agreement and say, this risk is covered by this clause in the agreement, or there may also be risks that are not covered in the agreement, but maybe there is sort of then an explanation as to what could be added to the agreement in this particular scenario. The whole thing is really a bit of an educational tool also for people to get smart on transacting in the CDR space.
Great. I should also note, in addition to the checklists that are coming out for each of the stakeholders Peter mentioned, there's also a guidebook that is already part of the Oscar document for people who are maybe not as legally experienced to look through and understand just the key definitions of the terms before we start to dive into the nuts and bolts of the contract itself. So that's already available at the CDR-FYI resources website on the Oscar page, which I had listed earlier. Matthew Esched, you raised your hand briefly. Question?
Yeah, a question that came up in our group was about if reductions and avoidances could be covered, and we had a lawyer in our group, and Seth, he said, well, it seems like maybe it would be included as an extra appendix or something of that sort. So can you speak a little bit to how you think about that? And I see also somebody had a question about methane, so maybe that could also be lumped into your answer.
No, absolutely. And sort of this is basically what we've tried to do when we say that, this is a baseline contract. You can use it for all these things as a starting point, right? And then you just sort of need to have someone who, you need to have legal counsel who knows about sort of methane and avoidance and reduction, and then build it out from there a little bit. This contract has been used primarily for removal, but we've also used it for avoidance credits and carbon and emission reduction situations. So it can be done, right? You just need to know sort of where to make the adjustments. There's absolutely no need to look at this and say, oh, this is a carbon removal offtake agreement, but I'm in the avoidance space, so forget about this. Absolutely not. This can be used. Most of it can be used. You just need to make a few adjustments here and there. Same thing for pre-purchases, right? You can also, again, you need to know where changes need to be made, and a lawyer can help you with this. But this reduces the amount sort of time involved in developing something from scratch enormously. I find it to be an incredibly helpful tool. We're using it in our own daily work, and it's fun, and we've had good experiences with it. And we have had situations from sending this agreement out to from the time of sending it out to signing in 3 to 4 weeks. There have also been instances, obviously, where it took longer, but it can really facilitate and the process tremendously.
Great. 2 notes to add on to Peter's comments. Thank you, Peter. One is that we've even seen some folks who are doing ARR projects say, yes, we would like to use this for maybe nature-based removals, not necessarily biochar, DAC, or enhanced rock weathering, or ocean CDR. So there are different methods of carbon removal more on the nature-based side, where we received a couple of inquiries from. The other thing to note for the survey, which we will send to you, is one of the main aspects we want to learn is how much time is it taking you here now today to make a contract, from time you reach verbal agreement to time that signatures go on digital or physical paper. and so that we can compare and contrast, like how much time are we able to cut out, how much of that change can we make here. To Peter's point about it might not take 3 or 4 weeks. Hopefully it does, but what is the what's the standard practice, and how many cycles do you have to go through of edits back and forth with various teams? So eyes open for that as well. Andre.
Thanks, Jason. I had a breakout session with Will Savage. We both are working more or less in the same space. And one issue that comes up for us is there's a certain variability that impacts on performance. And for example, we would remove CO2 from a smelter and store it someplace else. And there are substances in the gas of the smelter that impair carbon removal, that interfere with the process. That means the performance would be reduced, but it's none of our fault. It's because of impurities in the gas. How does that issue of assigning responsibility in case of not meeting a standard performance, how's that dealt with in those contracts?
Right. So this would either be sort of, if the credits are right, if you have a standard looking at your process and the credits are being issued, then that's fine, right? But if you have sort of a certification or an issuance delay, and you have already committed to deliver a certain amount of credits by a certain time, then we would need to see if that is a sort of a generation shortfall. That's sort of what it sounds like, right? That it is sort of in the process of generating the credits, something takes longer. The remedy would be, there are basically two kinds of remedies for that. Is first you get sort of a catch-up period of X weeks, months, whatever, what the parties negotiate in each individual case, and then if there is still no delivery, then the buyer would have the right to say, okay, well, obviously it's not panning out, so I have the right to terminate. There is sort of there is an option in the agreement sort of also for monetary compensation for the buyer, but that typically applies only in a delivery shortfall. So let's say in a scenario, right, credits are being issued, and there's been no problem there, but they're still not delivered because the supplier sort of overcommitted, right, and has now a commitment to various buyers and says, oh, I've sold more credits than are actually being issued. So in a scenario of that, there may be, it may be justified to be a bit, to be less lenient on the supplier. But that sounds like a generation shortfall to me, what you have described.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Other general questions about how Oscar is being used or could be used? Austin, I think you had a question from earlier that you said a question for later.
Yes.
Yeah, feel free.
So are buyers generally agreeable on CDR contracts since it's such a big win for them and it's something they seek out? Or are we seeing that they want some specific requirements that can be hard to achieve that they want added?
I mean, what buyers often well, I think it depends very much on what a buyer's expectations are, right? So there may be buyers who say we need certain amount of credits at a particular time because we have our own climate commitments and we got to be able to deliver. There may be other buyers who do this for almost philanthropic reasons. They may be a bit more, they may be a bit more lenient. there may be buyers in industries that are very competitive and say, well, you can say, we want to purchase credits from you, but we don't want you to sell your credits to our competitors. And by the way, if you offer credits to someone else in 2 or 3 years for a lower price, then we want you to we want you to reduce the price. We want to be able to reduce the price that we have to pay to you to match that. So there are very different kinds of, really depending on the scenario and motivations of buyers as to what they want to have in a contract. Right? And then as a supplier, you got to be cautious that you don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I never even thought about the competitive side of it, where it's don't sell to our competitors. Non-compete for carbon credits sounds kind of crazy, but I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturers do that sometimes. Airlines are asking for that sometimes. Mm-hmm. So there are industries where buyers can be a bit cautious there.
Yeah. Is that included in the Oscar standard? Anything about non-competes?
No, there's nothing in there. No, there's nothing in there.
Would it be worthwhile adding something in there as an explicit option? No.
No, I would say that this is something. I think we mentioned that in the guidebook, but that I wouldn't really say that this is standard, right?
Yeah.
If a particular buyer wants that, then they should raise it. But I wouldn't say that this should be in a standard template.
Sure. Okay. Maybe if they want certain stipulations, maybe the price goes up for them a little bit too.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
I see a few questions in the chat about different law versions, right? Sort of English law, German law. On CDR.FYI, so far, the only version that has been published is the New York law version. But as I said, English and German law is available. The easiest way is maybe you can just shoot me, whoever wants it, just shoot me an email, and I can send it to you, no problem. That's maybe the easiest. They will eventually also get published on CDR.FYI. There's sort of a little bit of a logistical and sort of update available to that. Just shoot me an email. I can put my email here in the chat.
Thank you, Peter.
And whoever wants the English law or the German law version gets a copy.
And Laura also, thank you. And Laura also put her own Calendly in there for questions of how to implement Oscar on the day-to-day basis, or to provide feedback on Oscar. One question that, since we're very near the end of time, to zoom out to talk about Oscar strategy for the end of 2027. Glenn Morley, who's one of the volunteers, is in the audience here. Hi, Glenn. So we can maybe talk about that a little bit. At this point, we're still in launch mode for Oscar. We're targeting, as was mentioned earlier, groups of lawyers. We're, talking to suppliers and buyers, but also intermediaries as well, brokers and marketplaces and places like that. We have a variety of different places where we're going to be showing up over the next 3 or 4 months here, where we have a session at Carbon Unbound in New York City, and Glenn is convening an effort at Climate Week Zurich. But beyond that, Glenn, maybe you can speak to some of the longer term goals of where we're thinking Oscar can go.
Thank you, Jason. So actually in our breakout group, we were talking about some of these. At the moment, in the starting point really for us was to get a template out that could be used, and as Peter said, to make it a living document that would grow and develop. So, it's deliberate that we want this thing to evolve and change, and we want feedback on it. So that started with launch at COP last year, and it's already being used in the field. The next phase, the phase we're currently in, is to really help intermediaries who want to use this as part of their process. We see them as critical in terms of growing the market. So we're working with a number of those. It's already adopted by Sencom, but we're talking to the major intermediaries, the ones for CDR, not more broadly carbon removal or carbon trading. And then beyond that, in our group, we were talking about, ultimately a contract is a device for managing risk. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't write one. So how do we start to get a better understanding of risk in a carbon transaction and map that more explicitly into clauses, and to give people potentially negotiating positions? So we're having a conversation with one intermediary who provide very rigorous due diligence as to how you would map the due diligence, the assessment of risks into a contract, and then the monitoring strategy that would follow that. So that's, if you like, direction of travel. But I think to answer the general thrust of the question, we want to help the industry standardize. This group is a small volunteer group that's picked one small issue, one brick in the wall, and we've put the brick in there. We've put the first brick in there. And we want to encourage other groups to find other bricks that need filling in the wall. And the intention is to make sure that nobody who is transacting in carbon removal starts with a blank sheet of paper, because that's just a recipe to a $50,000 lawyer bill, or risk that closes down an early stage supplier potentially, or damages the industry. So we want to make sure people have, if you like, operating software. They're free to change it, but we want to give them a starting place. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. And just like that, we're at the very top of the hour. Tito, want to take us out?
All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate everybody diving into this. Acknowledge the Oscar team, all of you diving into breakout rooms, some people that have already used the contract, some people that are going to use it. And if you've got your own project idea that's coming together that you want to share with the AirMiners community, you can email me at tito@airminers.com, and we can see about setting up an event similar to this Oscar one. All right, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tito.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Oscar team.
Bye.
Bye-bye.